Welcome back. Episode 2 of Punk Vacation, an unofficial Vinegar Syndrome podcast. This is Chris Haskell. As I said, you may know me from They Live by Film. You may not know me. Either way, please join me on this journey. I want to use this podcast as a way of finding joy and unfettered creativity, which I associate with the Vinegar Syndrome titles. I want this to be a podcast dedicated to bringing awareness and context to movies of any budget, from anywhere, and during any time. This is what I hope is the only episode I'm not going to have a guest. I already have some exciting guests lined up for September and even one in October, which I'll promote his channel here in just a moment. I thank you so much for joining. What I want to do with these mid-month drops is this is dropping in the middle of August, so I want to go through all the July releases. I've watched 13 movies since I got my subscriber shipment in, so it's been a marathon. And as typical Vinegar Syndrome fashion, I've seen a ton of movies from all over the board, and I can't wait to get in and talk about these. It's been a fantastic journey. So the way I want to go through these with y'all, I want to do the mainline titles first. Then just the way my brain works, I want to go alpha through the subtitles. So it'll be Cinematograph, then we're going to do Degausser. There's no distrib picks from July, and I hope I didn't mess that up. I don't think there's any. Then Vinegar Syndrome Archive, Labs, and then Pictures. So we'll go through all those titles. I'll give you my review. I'll tell you what I thought about it, who would tend to like this kind of movie, what I thought, if it's if it's something that you have to just rush out and get, or if it's something that is more just like for a specific audience. As this is a podcast dedicated to the love of Vinegar Syndrome, I'm probably not going to just straight up shit on any of the movies. There's one this month that I didn't love, but even that, I can tell it's more of like a style thing, and everybody I told about why I didn't love it, they were like, ooh, that sounds interesting. So sometimes it's just a matter of preference. So we're going to go through them all. We're going to go through spy number 472, 473, and 474. And I'll talk a little bit about the letterbox views, just to give a sense of kind of how many other people have seen this. I'll talk about what I can tell in terms of how it's selling from them. This is not inside information. I'm just getting it from their website. And but we'll kind of go through that. And then talk a little bit about the films themselves, what stood out to me. And there's going to be some, I'm just going to be a fair warning, there's going to be some that I'm a huge homer for this time. There's some that I think are must-owns, especially for Vinegar Syndrome fans, really for any fans of any movie. So be prepared for a little bit of homerism coming up. And I will try to get to the 4 partner titles that I saw as well. So we'll get to that at the end. As long as this doesn't take too long. All right, let's jump in.
Somewhere in the forbidding tundra mountains of Lapland, high above the Arctic Circle, a group of mining engineers were prospecting for copper. But what they unearthed was a story.
Title number 1, spy number 472 in the VS mainline, is a movie that had an English and a Danish movie filmed at the same time and released separately. And although they have a ton of overlap, it is actually 2 separate movies, although it's commonly quoted as one. And the movie is Reptilicus. There is 2 directors on this. The Danish director is Paul Bang, and the English director is Sidney Pink. Again, it's a little bit confusing, and it does sound like semantics, but these are 2 separate movies that were filmed at the same time with the same cast, about roughly the same subject matter, but they were determined and intended to be 2 separate films, not one with just like a language translation. So they were actually filmed as 2 separate ones. VS, as always, does a fantastic job of getting both the additions on there. It's that case that it's like they call it a gloss hard slipcase plus slipcover combo. So it goes inside a slipcover, then it goes inside the hard slipcase. As always, Vinegar Syndrome did a fantastic job on the special features and including all versions of the film. So this is a 3-disc set. It's a UHD disc and 2 Blu-rays. It's a new scanned 4K and the print I saw looked beautiful. I saw the Danish version when I watched it. As far as I remember, they're claiming this is for the Danish version of the film, this is the first time it's been in the US on any disc, DVD, Blu-ray, anything. They redid the subtitles for the transfer, and as you can imagine, the features are fantastic. There's a commentary track with the film historian. They have a great retrospective, 32-minute retrospective on the film itself. There's an 11-minute feature called Life After Reptilicus. There's a 30-minute, I guess, another documentary with a film historian named Stephen Bissett, who's also an illustrator, and he kind of walks through the legacy of Reptilicus in a 30-minute feature. So there's just a ton of special features. It's packed, beautiful art as always, and beautiful film, beautiful packaging all around. All right, as far as I can tell, this one has sold about 2,000 copies. There's just under 2,000 copies left. This has been a big seller for them. This is a popular release, and I kind of get it. There's this whole subgenre of kaiju movies or monster movies, obviously for fans of Godzilla, obviously for fans of Gamera, but even beyond that, there's a whole bunch of movies that were made in Korea and in Europe that had these monsters in them. Obviously, the US had some monster movies. And so this fits just very snug in that genre. I wouldn't say there's anything to me that necessarily stands out as like, oh, this is the best one in the genre, but I like this movie a lot. It's very snug, it's very comfortable, it feels very known. It has a message in it as well. It's a perfect example of one of these genre films. The basic story is there's some miners that are digging up in Lapland, which is where Santa Claus is from, obviously. And they're digging in the ice up there, and they accidentally cut off a tail. It's frozen, so they bring it back to Denmark for science. And there's a sleepy scientist that forgets to close the door in the freezer, wakes up, the tail is thawing out. Unfortunately for them, this is a regenerative beast. So even though it's been asleep for hundreds of thousands of years or millions of years or whatever, the tail immediately wakes up, starts to grow, and wreaking havoc ensues. I think you'll know by now, by the way I'm describing it, if this is a movie you would like or not. For me, it's a film I'm really happy to own. I like monster movies. They're the kind of thing that I can have on. Sometimes it's nice to have on either to sleep or if there's chores or if it's just like a lazy Saturday afternoon. I like having these kind of movies in my collection that are on and that are very relaxing and calm. This is a fantastic example of that. For me, nothing is necessarily standout. It's not like it's hilarious or the special effects work is amazing or anything like that. It's a solid entry. They hit all the beats, and it's a ton of extras. So it's a fun all-around package. I'm very happy I own this one. All right. Now, I'm not even going to bury the lead. We're getting to what's probably my favorite one we're going to talk about today, although there's one that may come close. 1,100 views on Letterboxd, and a movie that I had not seen, although I do enjoy Category 3 films. I'm talking about A Chinese Torture Chamber Story 1. So if anybody did listen to episode 1 with Curtis, we talk about this a little bit. So this might not be a surprise for all of y'all. This movie is fucking amazing, okay? It is everything I love about Cat 3. It has some brutal moments, but it's hilarious. It's way over the top. There's nudity in the film, but it's all done in just to perfection. I think this is I couldn't, for a long time I said Ricky O was my favorite Cat 3. This is pushing it. I might be willing to say this is better. I don't know. I have to see it again. But this movie is amazing. What a surprise. By far and away, the surprise of 2024 in terms of viewing for me. Oh yeah, it's spy number 473 if I didn't say that. But this movie is an absolute must-have for, I would say for anybody that's willing to put up with, some of the edgier content within movies. What you get in exchange for that is just pure joy. And like this is a party movie. It's a fantastic movie to watch in a group. It's hilarious. Absolutely something that's going to shoot up the ranks for, horror lists or best movie of all time lists. This is a great job by Vinegar Syndrome and Sam Deegan, who did a lot with the disc, from the production side, commentary, and really kind of added some amazing context for this one. This is one of those ones that people are gonna wish they own. It looks like it's also sold about 4,000 copies, so it has some left. It's not like a mad panic to get it, but I would please get this before it sells out. This is one of those ones that for years people are going to be talking about, and I guarantee at some point in your life, there's going to be a moment where you have not seen Chinese Torture Chamber Story, and then there's going to be a moment where you see it, and you're going to wish you had seen it 10 years sooner. So I don't even really want to give too much away, but I'll give a little bit, obviously, to kind of tantalize and tease a little bit here. There is a this is a story that's very loosely based off of a collection of stories that came out around torture in sort of, ancient Chinese history, right? So there are elements in this story that are very real and that happened, and they kind of built on that to make the story. All right, so this movie came out in 1994, directed by Bosco Lam. I haven't seen a lot from Bosco Lam. He's a name that I know, but in terms of the movies that he's directed, I haven't really seen a ton. He was a kind of AD and actor, and he was around a lot of Hong Kong cinema. He was involved with God of Gamblers series, Casino Raiders. He's been involved in a lot of movies, but as far as directing, he doesn't have a lot on disc. So and he only has 12 movies that are kind of titled to him, credited to him. So, it's possible we get a few more Bosco Lam movies. If they're anything like this, I want them all. What he's able to do in this movie so well, the reason I'm so crazy for a Chinese torture chamber story, is he takes these historical documents and this historical kind of torture stories, which are obviously horrific and terrible. And he puts this sort of magical twist on them, and he tells the story of one particular lord who brings a woman into his harem, and there's an order of command to kind of get time with him, but he falls for one of the new recruits, the new women that come in. He dies, and so most of the movie is a trial about the woman who is accused of murdering this lord, and it goes back in time and sort of catches up the story of what's going on. So that's the structure of it. But what happens within that structure is this insane, beautiful, like I don't even know. It's almost like a Princess Bride or something where, it cuts back to the scene where they're in a courtroom, and then it kind of goes to this fantasy land of events, and the difference between the fantasy and the reality in the courtroom are stark. This movie is nothing like a Princess Bride. That's an insane comparison, only in structure. But um, the scenes in the courtroom do involve some torture, but then when they flash back, they show this kind of budding romance and they show sex in a way that is just hilarious. Like there's a woman who's playing with all these different sex toys. The most famous scene in this film is this wuxia scene, this beautiful kind of wuxia scene that's filmed very authentically. It would fit in any, martial arts film, this kind of wuxia based, this beautiful kind of ballet, and the whole time this couple is fucking, okay? And so it's just there's this crazy um, there's this crazy sex going on. They're yelling things at each other. I was dying in this scene. But the comedy is throughout. Even before, when this lord, he's married to his wife. Obviously, he's having sex outside of marriage, as is she. But when he has sex with his wife, she's into all these crazy things. And those scenes are really funny. It's just it don't be Curtis said this, and I'll say this too. Don't be dissuaded by the name. This is not a torture movie. If you're looking for a torture movie, we'll talk about that in just a second, because the sequel is closer to that. But Chinese Torture Chamber Story 1 has light on the torture chamber, and just freaking hilarious throughout the rest of it. Um, just a pure joy to watch. I don't really know how else to say it. It's just a movie that I want to recommend to everybody. Shout it from the hills. This should be in your collection. It's not a risk. If you're a fan of laughing and just kind of enjoying movies and having fun, this is right up there with anything you could name. It's not a so bad it's good movie, if you want to call it like that. I don't even like that term anyways. It's not like that. It's a very well-made movie. It's just hilarious. And the commentary from Sandigan is amazing. And there's a special feature of Erica Schultz from Unsung Horrors. By the way, if you're not listening to Unsung Horrors podcast and you're listening to the Vinegar Syndrome podcast, I think you'll love Unsung Horrors. Not that it's all Vinegar Syndrome, but there's a lot of crossover in content and in kind of mentality of listeners. So listen to that podcast. But Erica breaks down a video essay where she goes through and finds historical documents and like scans the images in and like goes a very academic but entertaining discussion on like the history of Chinese torture. It's an extremely well-made video essay. I'm not going to call out a lot of individual special features, but this one is top notch. It's very good, and it's worth the disc in and of itself, let alone the movies, which are just fantastic. So I could gush forever about Chinese Torture Chamber Story 1. I'll stop there. All right, staying on Spine 473 for a moment. Chinese Torture Chamber Story 2. The first one had 1,100 views on Letterboxd. This one only has 310 as of recording. Not as many people have seen this. This is definitely a film that is probably way underseen and is a good idea, I think, to include it as part of a double feature. I don't know how many people would, buy, although anybody that saw the first one would rush out to buy the sequel, but I think fans of the first one purely for that fun element might be a little disappointed by the sequel. I think it's good in its own way, but it's a very different movie. So the director is Kin Nam Cho, probably most famous. Most of y'all probably know him from Chinese erotic ghost story. I'm sure you might say there's one that you like better, but as far as I know, that's sort of his most famous film. This film has a lot more actual torture, so this is much closer to the name, and this is what you're probably looking for. If you just pass by the shelf and you see Chinese Torture Chamber Story, this one probably has a lot more of what you want. The interesting thing about it is that although it can be pretty brutal at times, there's certainly levity in the movie. It's not all just pure brutality. In fact, some of the characters are very light and not quite Sammo Hung funny, but they're just lighter and just kind of more goofy. They would probably fit in like a Mr. Vampire series or something like that. But the overall tone is certainly much darker, and it's a movie that I think is is good. I'm guessing that it's gonna be pretty split in terms of people that watch the first one and go in to watch this. I would say just kind of know who you are. If you want to have a good time and laugh, watch the first one. If you want something a little darker, then this is the one for you. A little more nasty, a little more gnarly. This is where to start. It's a similar. Uh, the other thing I think is probably worth calling out is that it's very historically accurate. So this is where Erica's essay, video essay, really stands out to me because it's actually extremely accurate when she starts breaking down like the different types of torture that was used. Some of it is in the first movie for sure, but a lot of it's in the second one, and it's interesting. I mean, it's a horror movie because of the horrific things that happen, and it's even crazier that this was common. And it was the way that a lot of people got sort of the justice system used these torture devices to get information from people. So that's an interesting part of history, right? I mean, it certainly doesn't. Luckily, we're not in that situation anymore, but before the mythology of like truth serums and all that kind of stuff came out, and tough interrogators, tough FBI interrogators, before all that, there was just straight, physical torture to get information. And in both movies, actually, the torture is used in a way to have people admit guilt even when they weren't guilty. So, there's certainly some parallels there to like the Salem witch trials and just the conquistadors and a lot of these, really shitty kind of leaders that abuse their power to get what they want out of people that they have power over. So, yeah, it has good history to it. It's interesting. I personally like the first one quite a bit better because I just like to have fun with these movies. But the second the second film is quite good. The other thing worth calling out is that Frank Jang does the commentary for part two. As usual, it's a fantastic linguistic and cultural um, commentary. Frank is amazing at kind of breaking down what's going on and why they're using certain phrases and just the history of it. It's very different. Sam Deegan's commentary is incredibly well researched and gives a lot of context. As anything, Frank Chang is just that's his specialty, right? Is being actually Chinese and knowing all these like little linguistical nuances and stuff. So that's there too. Um, there's a really cool feature by Justin Declos of the Important Cinema Club called The Cat 3 Films of Wong Jing. I think it's worth a watch. It's very good. The video essay that I was talking about is called Titillating Torture, and there's a good booklet that's written by Grady Hendrix. So, yeah, I mean, this is I don't know how else to say it. To me, this is a slam dunk, absolutely must own. No matter how much I pare down my collection, this one's staying in, and it's probably going into my top 100 films of all time. I love it a lot. All right, next release, VS 474, coming in at 916 views on Letterboxd as of time of recording. Intrepidos Punks and Vengeance of the Punks double feature. This is another one that I'm gonna say is probably pretty close to a must own. This movie is awesome. It's so fun. It really, really feels like a kind of Ozploitation movie or an Italian genre film. It's got the very similar vibe, very similar budget, very similar aesthetic. It snuggles right in there, right with the best of just these kind of fun exploitation action movies. This is a biker film, punk rock film. Anarchy is throughout. I mean, we'll get into it in just a second. This is truly an anarchic film. So they really captured the spirit of what it is to be punk rock. They didn't shy away from it. It has sold slightly less, but it's still selling really well. Best I can tell, it sold around 3,500 copies so far. So I have no idea how this one's not sold out. This movie is awesome. And I'm only guessing it hasn't sold out because maybe people haven't heard about it. Um, but it is yeah, I really do think this is like a must own. It's just fun. It's extremely energetic and chaotic in all the best ways. Um, I loved it. It's a 1987 movie. Francisco Guerrero is the director of it. And he's sort of this great genre filmmaker. Like, if you go through his, his filmography, he's got stuff like The White Condor, Condor Blanco. Anyways, his filmography looks super fun. Lots of action movies. Again, just I don't really know how else to say it other than he just seems to be a genre film director, like in his blood, and seems to make some really fun action movies. Intrepidos Punks is it, it's just a wild film. So there's really no good guys in this. It's funny the way they set it up because there's this gang of punks that come through and they just terrorize. They just love doing cocaine. They love breaking things. They love murder. They're just like, they're bad people. They don't shy away from anything, but they're so awesome. Oh, they rape too. So, they hit all the beats. But they're just awesome people. Like I mean, within the movie, like within the logic of the film, they're awesome. And they're not shying away from all the bad things they do, but they're portrayed as just like, look how cool these people are. And honestly, they are pretty cool. They have great costumes. The music, the soundtrack is awesome. There's a theme song created for this, um, and it's super fun. The music is super fun. So, you have these punks that are doing terrible things, and then you have these sort of really lame, boring, dumb cops that are written to be that way. I don't think it's like a budget issue or the way they're filmed or something. Like they're just written to be uninteresting, and you don't really want them to win, even though they're doing the right thing. And so, of course, there's shootouts, and of course, there's some action in the film, and uh, I guess like the basic premise is that these punks, to get revenge on the cops for imprisoning them and kind of making their life hard, they go back and they abduct the wives and kill the wives of these wardens and jailers and cops, and then there's a war that ensues between these groups. It's a this is just a I know I've said fun like 20 times. I don't really know a better word for it, but this is just a great time. Again, kind of like Chinese torture chamber story, although for a different reason. This is a fun party movie, I think. Like this is a great movie in a group. You'll be singing along the soundtrack. You'll be tapping your toes to the good punk song. Yeah, it's just one of those movies where I think, as weird as this might sound, it kind of you want to talk about it afterwards and maybe kind of diagnose it a little bit because it leaves you with this weird feeling of like, well, who am I supposed to be rooting for here? I think the Francisco Guerrero pulls off that balance flawlessly. He nails it. I think he really gets it. And this, I don't know if this is going to be like a top 100 movie for me, but it's a contender. It's very good. I liked it a lot. And again, I want to be really careful with this as we go through. And I'm, representing Vinegar Syndrome here, of course, unofficially, but like, I want to be really careful with this term so bad it's good. I'm going to try not to use it anymore after episode 2. I just want to like kind of start to draw a distinction here. And the only reason I'm using it is to say like there's a temptation to say like, oh, it's good because it's funny or whatever. But like, no, like this is, they had some budget constraints and stuff, right? Because they were trying to put together these movies in 1987, 1988 in Mexico off of, whatever money they could find, right? But like it's a very well made movie. I mean, you would put it up to Mad Max, you could put it up to, like I said, a lot of the exploitation, a lot of the Italian genre cinema. It has a good score, it understands story, the characters are phenomenal. So yeah, it's good. I think this is all around a fun movie. I'm super glad to have seen it. So shot at the same time, although it was released later, is the direct sequel, La Venganza de los Punks, or Vengeance of the Punks. This had a different director. His name was Damian Lacosta Esparza. He's not quite as his films are a bit more kind of, I don't know how to say it, like maybe a little bit all over the place, but he was another one of these directors that made a ton of action movies. And this was near the end of his career. He had been working for a while. Um, but yeah, this is kind of near the end of his career. A lot of his movies have death or vengeance in the title, so this fits in pretty well there. Um, but this has even less views on Letterboxd, so similar to Chinese Torture Chamber Story 2, this is almost exactly the same. So, yeah, that's interesting actually. So, Chinese Torture Chamber Story had 1100, Intrepidos Punks had 900, so pretty close. And then both of the sequels have almost the exact same number. This one's at 305 instead of 310. So the sequel drops off quite a bit. Um, I would say this one, uh, it picks up right where we leave off, has a lot of the similar characters, not everybody, but a lot of similar characters. And this one just jumps right into like quite a bit of rape and just like long, kind of extended sex scenes. I guess you could say orgies, but it's not really like it's just sort of like again this kind of anarchic spirit to it, right? So it's not that everybody's having sex. It's like when they get back to camp, they're just kind of lounging around. Some people are drinking. Some people are super excited to be doing cocaine. Some people are just naked, getting into it. So it's just like this sort of lifestyle that they've built up, and it's a vibe, I guess you could say. Both films are. I think both directors capture the sentiment of it and like the tone of it perfectly. This also has a good soundtrack. I think it's a great sequel. I don't think there's a big drop off in quality. These are two Intrepidos Punks and Vengeance of the Punks, just back to back, fantastic double feature. And this is VS 474. And so, for me, rounding out the month, as far as the main line goes, you have two films that are, I don't really care who you are, like in terms of what you like to watch in movies. I would say must watches, if not must owns, for sure must watches. And then the sequels for those films, which it's nice to have as a package. And then Reptilicus, which some people are going to be mad at me for not calling a must own. I mean, if you're a fan of these kind of monster films, it's a slam dunk. Again, like I said, I like it a lot. So I could just understand why some people wouldn't want to have it. It is close to that kind of thing that Mystery Science Theater would make fun of in terms of like the quality of it. So if that's not your thing, just be forewarned. But I had a great time with all of these, and I think VS Mainline killed it this month.
May have been on leave for a couple of months, but that doesn't...
Hannon, you had a breakdown. You were in a sanitarium. It wasn't a leave, it was a breakdown. Why do you force me to say these things?
All right. Cinematograph. I'm going to go through the sub-labels now. Cinematograph is primarily, as far as I can understand, the baby of Justin La Liberty. I think Justin has, as far as I can tell, meticulous taste. Everything he's recommended or everything he's put out that he's kind of been a part of has been fantastic. This is title number 6 in his cinematograph line. 1 through 5 has been something I've really liked. In fact, title 5 is an Abel Ferrara movie called Dangerous Game, and the movie is fantastic. It's just kind of, I guess probably the closest thing you would compare it to is like a Leaving Las Vegas type of self-destruction movie, although it's done in a different way. But it's Harvey Keitel self-destructing for hour and 40 minutes or whatever. But the special feature, the documentary with Abel Ferrara, it's more of just a frank discussion with him, kind of goes into why I love Abel Ferrara so much. It's this extremely raw, brutally honest take, kind of introspective look, very similar vibe to Jodorowsky when he does his commentaries, where he's just like nothing to hide. And so Abel Ferrara gives this fantastic description of what it was like to work with Madonna, what it was like to be in the studios, why he was kicked out of Hollywood. Like he just gets into all of it. And I love that special feature. So that's Title 5, which came out, I guess, most likely June. I think they try to put out one a month, maybe May, if because of the partner month thing. But that takes us to number 6, which is a Jonathan Demme movie. It is a extremely underseen Jonathan Demme movie. If you think of how popular he is as a director, this one only has 4,400 views on Letterboxd, which again, just for those tracking at home, is less than Reptilicus, which had 6,800. So not a lot of people have seen Last Embrace. This was a movie that came out. It was um, a pretty early movie in his career. He got his start through AIP. He did a lot of films for American International. And then this came out in 1979, right before he kind of got into his golden years. He was still doing a lot of music videos here. He was still doing a lot of other types of kind of artistic projects. For me, the only movie from Jonathan Demme that I love, truly love, is Stop Making Sense. I know he's done Silence of the Lambs. I think it's a pretty good movie. I think Manhunter's a better Hannibal Lecter story. But Jonathan Demme, for me, is a director that I'm okay with. Last Embrace did not change my opinion of him as a director. So I can't lie and say that I love this movie. The video essay from Sam Deegan is fantastic. The commentary, I listened to about half of the commentary. I don't know how much you've heard of Howard S. Berger, but he's just this fantastic kind of historian. Steve Mitchell does a great job on this as well. So it's a beautifully packaged film, typically, Vinegar Syndrome fashion. The packaging, the art, the special features, everything is top notch. This is a 4K and a Blu-ray together, so it's a double feature or double disc feature, release. Last Embrace, it's what I don't like about it is it kind of plays into a lot of genres that I struggle with in general. So again, this is kind of like I said in the beginning, as I describe why I didn't like it, you probably, more than half of y'all will probably be like, well, yeah, I definitely want to see that. The best I can put it is that to me it's a combination of like a Douglas Sirk melodrama with this spy sort of mystery film, and it also has a layer of that paranoia that you might see in a movie like The Conversation. This is that it has that new Hollywood vibe at times, but it also definitely, I think, tries to lean into that classic 50s kind of melodrama aesthetic. Um, uh, I don't want to shit on the film. Uh, I think there's going to be a lot of people that watch this and give it 5 stars. A lot of people are probably going to love the aesthetic. A lot of people are probably really going to resonate with this because they like melodrama, or because that whole paranoia aspect is done very well. The main actor in this is Roy Schneider. Roy Scheider, and he's actually really good. He has to play a part where he's coming out of an institution, a mental institution, a psychiatric hospital. He's being released, and he lives with this paranoia that he's being followed. And it's that whole thing that's in a lot of thrillers, I guess, to say, where you don't know if they're being paranoid or if their paranoia is based on something real, and you just don't really know, so it adds to the drama. There are some elements to this movie I think they nail. For me, it was a little bit of a confusing tone, and I didn't really register with it. But please comment, tell me why I'm an idiot. I would love to hear from people that love this movie. It has been selling less. I don't think that's any tie into my views on it. Obviously, I'm not saying that. As far as I can tell, it has sold only about 2,000 copies, which is still pretty good for a movie that not a lot of people have seen. For a Jonathan Demme picture, you probably would have thought it would have sold more. I'm imagining this is going to sell a lot during the sale, the biannual sales. Um, if I was going to pick it up and give it a chance, it would certainly, for me, I would wait for the sale. But don't let me dissuade you if you're into Circean melodrama or that kind of conspiracy theory genre. It does a good job in both of those. All right, moving on from cinematograph, moving on to Degausser video. There was a release from Degausser in July. It was Blood Cult. The story behind Blood Cult is pretty cool. There was a filmmaker named Christopher Lewis. He was one of the first, or maybe the first, filmmaker hired specifically to make direct-to-video movies. So he made some horror films. Vinegar Syndrome has released a lot of them. And previous to this, and one of the ones that came out this month was Blood Cult. It has under 1,000 views on Letterboxd, and it's an interesting one to have such little views because it's got kind of a cool history, right? I mean, it was a pioneer in a lot of ways. Blood Cult, The Ripper was a movie that came out from Degausser last month, I believe, or within the last 2 months. And then separately on the VS mainline, there's a Homegrown Horrors box set that has Blood Cult 2, but it has a different name. I think it's maybe Revenge. It has a different name, but it's in the Homegrown Horror set. And so it's the first three, these kind of early three direct-to-video horror films from Christopher Lewis. He has a very distinct style. This movie is a lot of fun, actually. So it opens up, well, within the first 5 minutes anyways, there's this killer is beating someone to death with someone else's head. Just to give you a sense of, the wildness here within Blood Cult, right? So Christopher Lewis had a good sense for horror, creative in the kills. I think if you think about the budget on this one was pretty low, and that shows at times. I mean, it's not flawless, and people that don't like this are going to point out maybe some of the acting or some of the aesthetics of it are pretty low budget, which, I mean, fair. But once you kind of get settled into this story, I think you see what Christopher Lewis was trying to do, and I think it's a pretty solid story. Actually, it's a pretty solid horror story. I think it's done really well. I think the kills are very kind of imaginative, obviously in a very macabre way. I think the mystery, sort of the suspense of who the killer is kept pretty well, and the whole thing has this sort of dreamy vibe to it at times. I think they use the camera well when they want to convey, like, for example, when the cult comes in, when you first meet the cult, they sort of pan out to where there's not a lot of detail. You lose the fact that it's like a low budget film. They use smoke a lot, they use shadows a lot, they use the music well to create atmosphere. I think they do a good job. I think there's a lot of artistic vision in this. And it's a really good release. This one seems like it sold, at least the limited edition, because the standard always sells as well. But at least the limited edition has already sold over 1,000 copies. It's selling pretty fast, it seems like. As far as features go, it's cool because they actually found an old commentary track with the director, so they put that on here. And there's a new commentary track with the producer of the movie and a film historian named John Woolley. The producer is Linda Lewis, who's related to Christopher. And then there's a bunch of documentaries and kind of shorts on there, I guess. So there's a new interview with Linda Lewis. There's an interview with Bob Blair, which is pretty cool because he's the son of the person who produced this movie. So he gives that background. That's an 8-minute interview with him. And there's a full hour-long documentary they found and put on this disc as well from 2012, and a few archival interviews. So it's extremely stacked release, very similar to the way that Saturn's Core. I don't know if y'all have a lot of those in your, in your shelves, but if you don't have Saturn's Core and you're okay with shot on video or like a lot of low budget filmmaking, they're one of the best at just stacking hours of content on the disc. and DeGausser certainly is doing a good job of feeling like that. There's also an early short film that was also produced by this guy Bill Blair. It's called The Appointment. It's fine. It's cute. It's a fun little watch. It's short. It's like 7 minutes. But yeah, so it's definitely SOV. Um, you have to kind of know if that's something you're comfortable with and that's something you're interested in. But it has this great history of being an early, kind of a movie made specifically for the home video market. So I said Linda was related to Chris. I'm sorry, it's his wife. So you get to see the movie, and then you get to hear the wife of the director talk about it, and she has obviously all the history and everything. So it's yeah. I mean, I think this is a fun one. I like it. I do like SOV movies. I have a lot of them. I watch a lot of them. For me, I'm really happy to own this, and I'm excited to go check out The Ripper pretty soon so I can complete the trilogy here. All right. Moving on from DeGosser is I don't think there's a Distrib Picks title from July. Please forgive me if I got that wrong, but I don't believe there is. So going right into, we have 3 more left. We're going to do Vinegar Syndrome Archive, Vinegar Syndrome Labs, and then Vinegar Syndrome Pictures, okay? The Archive is a movie that, similar to Chinese Torture Chambers story, it's one of these like seminal events in my life where there was a time when I had not seen this and a time when I had, and I am so happy to have seen this one, okay? Vinegar Syndrome Archive is an interesting line because they're 45 titles in. So I can imagine that they might be entering into like a phase where you don't know like what to buy, or it's hard to keep up with them, or some of the early titles are going for these crazy prices on eBay, so the completionists get frustrated and don't want to buy because they don't want to feel like they can't complete. I get all that. This is one you need to own, I swear. They Call Me Macho Woman is so good. It's so funny. I don't know how there's only 511 views on Letterboxd, first of all. This must be one of those movies that just kind of snuck under the radar. It is produced by Troma, not made by Troma, but it's distributed by Troma. If you want to compare it, it's not a perfect comparison, but if you're going to compare it to a modern movie, it's sort of like a proto You're Next, where you meet this woman and you don't realize what she's capable of, and as the film unfolds, you just see her getting stronger and stronger and stronger and smarter and more savvy and more handy and more, have better ingenuity, and it's just crazy. The stuff that she's doing by the end of the film, she's like this stone cold killer, and she starts off as this meek, well, I don't know, meek, but as this traditional kind of suburban, housewife or girlfriend, whatever. It would be, other than You're Next, the other comparison for this would probably be something like a rape revenge movie, although there's no actual rape in the movie. So you don't have to sit through that to get to the revenge part. It's like as they start to attack her, she uses her sexuality to entice them in to then destroy them. So it happens in kind of rapid fire. She's somebody you don't want to mess with. It's the villains in this movie are what make it really fun. And I guess I've said this 3 times now. This is a fantastic movie in a crowd, at a live event, at a party. It's a great time. Like there's this wonderful training montage where she's in this shed, like sharpening her tools because she's about to go back, even though she's free or can escape. She's about to go back to the people that tried to hurt her and get her revenge on them. And this whole montage around getting all of her weapons ready is just beautiful filmmaking. It's fantastic. It's the way she sharpens the weapons, the way she creates them, she thinks about it, the like kind of utility belt that she builds to hold them all in, and just the whole thing is wonderful. And then the final kind of act of the movie is her using all these weapons and setting traps and just becoming this like expert assassin just off of her wits. It's fantastic. They Call Me Macho Woman is it's the most fun I've had in VS Archive has Action USA, which is the movie that got me into VSA a couple years back. So I think I don't know if it's as good as that. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, but it's in that same vein as Action USA. It's just a movie that has no business being as good and as fun as it is. And this is right up there for me, which I don't know if you haven't seen Action USA, that may sound like a joke or like I'm being sarcastic or something, but that's about the highest compliment I can give an action movie. I don't know how else to heap love on a movie other than to say it's in the ballpark of Action USA, just in terms of the creativity and the madness that goes into the writing and the making of this movie. It's pretty nonstop action. It doesn't really take a lot of breaks. It's just super fun, and I wish that Patrick Donahue made a bunch more movies. He only has a few credits to his name. Probably the most famous one outside of this would be a movie called Kill Squad. So hopefully some of y'all have seen that. I can't wait I've heard about it for years. I haven't seen it, but I'm definitely gonna go check it out. Because Patrick Donahue is somebody that I wish he was just still making movies. The other thing about I should say, They Kill Me or They Call Me Macho Woman seems like it sold around 2,000 copies ish in that range. It's a shame. This movie needs to sell 10,000 copies and it needs to be on everybody's shelf. It's that good. I can't wait for it to get recommended. You're hearing it here first. I just can't wait for more people to see this and start recommending it around. I hope it gets a huge cult following, and I hope everybody involved has a long career at conferences talking about how much fun they had making it. All right. As about opposite of the spectrum as you can possibly get from They Call Me Macho Woman, let's talk about VS Labs. So VS Labs is a fascinating sub-label for me. They have, the sci-fi box set they put out of Peter Shulkin movies is possibly my release of the year it came out. I love those movies. Obviously, Radiance, put them out at the same time, or what is like a split release or whatever. But the VS release was fantastic for them as always. The Labs line, I think, it's fascinating to me. Like it feels like a Labs, like it really lives into the name. And this movie is another great example of truly living into the name, because it's a 1989 movie. Made for Polish TV. So right around then in Polish television, it was kind of like a golden era, right? That's when you have the Decalogue that came out right around the same time. And then you have this movie by Ryszard Bogajski, and please apologies, Polish names are always tricky for me. But Interrogation is if anybody has seen Tom Tykwer's Heaven, it reminds me a little bit of that. It also has some parallels, although this is going to be an odd comparison talking about Polish people coming out of the war, but it has a little bit of comparisons to a Nazi exploitation movie. There's no Nazis in this movie, but there is a kind of secret police, and there is this kind of control. The world of interrogation is a world where police can bring people in and hold them for no reason and interrogate them if they think there's a crime, if they think they're involved. They can hold them and torture them and do whatever they want to. So it's about the story of a woman who's brought in and, interrogated. And it's a very strict police regime. They have no respect for these Polish prisoners. That they view them, a lot of them, they view them as conspirators, or specifically communists is kind of like the bad word of the time. And so they're in there trying to get information for them to break up the communist, rebels, I guess, in the area at that time. And a love story kind of develops. It's complicated, right? But there's a love story that develops between the prisoner and one of the guards. I don't want to give away too much, but the way that it plays out, it has its own twists and it has its own kind of angles there. This is for sure, an art house movie. It's for sure a more serious festival film. Um, it would be interesting to see what happens if this one sells like hotcakes for them. I think as of the time I'm looking at this, it's not exactly been as hot of a seller as some other titles. It I don't know, maybe this is exactly what Labs is for, is to kind of figure out which ones are going to sell more and less. It'd be really interesting to see if VS starts to dig into Polish movies. Obviously, those wells are pretty deep. There's a lot of fantastic directors and filmmakers that have still not been released, even though they've been mined for films for years. And so I think similar to Italy, Sweden, France, this is one of those countries that has a pretty rich film history and a lot to pull from. So if this one does sell well, I'm assuming there might be more. Um, Honestly, even if it doesn't sell well, Justin, whoever's listening for the VS Labs line, please put out more Polish films. For the most part, there's always something interesting. This one I think suffers a little bit in my mind of being a little bit melodramatic at times. I think it's not very subtle in what it's saying and the way the writing is done and the way the characters are written. It's certainly, I think, lacks a bit of subtlety, but it's very engrossing. The way the story plays out is excellent, and I had a great time with this one. It's somewhat well seen on Letterboxd. Not great. It has 3,200 views, so it's somewhat known. The special features on this are a little bit light, although there's a really good one. So they have a 48-minute documentary with one of the people that's interviewed for that is Agnieszka Holland, who she's just been in some of the best sort of Polish films ever. And so it's really cool to hear her talk about it, as well as director Bogacki's widow. So it's some archival footage that they found of her talking about it. And then there's a essay and booklet written by a Polish historian. So it creates some nice context around what was happening and what was going on and why this film was important. So yeah, I mean, this is a 19. It shows 1982 when it was made. It was released many different years, all the way up until 1989. So this is one of those movies that has a complex release history. It was, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was nominated for a Palme d'Or when it came out in 1990, right? So look, I mean, it's a film that has a lot of critical success behind it, and I think there's elements of it that I liked a lot. And I'm a sucker for Polish cinema, so I'm pro on this one. Yeah, I'm fascinated every time VSL has a new release because it's all over the place. It's like, a Western, sort of comedy Western, or like I said, Polish sci-fi, now this one. But while we're on the topic of interrogation, if you haven't seen Tom Tykwer's Heaven, it's something I've been meaning to revisit. I remember loving it. I saw it in theaters, actually. I don't even know, 20 years ago now, 22 years ago, whatever. But I remember loving it, and I still vividly remember the ending and sort of some of the way the story plays out. So I do want to go see it after seeing this. Kind of made me want to go back and revisit that. If anybody's seen Heaven recently, please talk to me. I'd love to hear if it still holds up. And y'all, we have done it. Last one, Vinegar Syndrome Pictures, VS Pictures. This is release number 7. It's 8 Eyes. It's directed by Austin Jennings. If y'all know the name, it's, I believe, his first feature film or second, but he has done over 80 episodes of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs, so he's, he has a lot of connections in the industry. This is a horror film that he has made. It was released last year, 2023, played at a bunch of horror festivals, got a lot of attention. Lead actress is Emily Sweet, who obviously is kind of becoming scream queen in her own right. Been in quite a few horror movies. Before I get into the movie itself, just a little bit of background. It has about 1,100 views on Letterboxd, I imagine that's going to go up quite a bit as word gets out around this. I'll get into that in just a second. Has a lot of ties to just a lot of things that I love in general. Obviously, the Joe Bob Briggs is great. The producer of this is a guy named, well, Vinegar Syndrome has a hand in the money for this and producing it. One of the producers that was really involved in the Serbia side of this movie was a gentleman named Sigurd Dixon, who kind of has a trauma background. And it has sold pretty well. It's going pretty fast. There's just over 1,000 copies left of the time I'm recording this, but it's selling pretty fast. I imagine it'll still be around in the sale, but probably not that much longer than that. I think it'll probably, at least the limited will probably be gone. It's selling pretty fast. So the basic premise here is some kind of combination of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre with, maybe like an Eli Roth movie like Hostel, something like that. Tourists going to, in this case, it's Serbia and Macedonia, meet a local, turns out to be the wrong person to hang out with. Terror ensues. Final girl comes out and has to claw her way out of a horrible, terror-filled, horrific situation. This movie has a lot of pretty gnarly imagery, and I think one of the things is that I loved about it is it's obvious that Austin Jennings and maybe Matthew Frank, the writer, I don't know who did it or if this was the input from Vinegar Syndrome, I'm not sure, but the actual like horror scenes in this film are fantastic. It's like art in the truest sense, macabre and fucked up for sure, but definitely art. They are filmed well, designed well. You immediately, you don't have to have any background. The whole set design, everything is just pure terror. And the feeling of being trapped, the feeling of being tortured, they capture it all flawlessly. That's all done very well. The main villain in this, the actor's name is Bruno. In the film, his name is Saint Peter. In real life, his name is Bruno Veljanovsky. He's phenomenal. I think he does a really strong job in this. He has to play like a couple different tones, and he has to go back and forth between being charming, being kind of like serious, being funny, just being like a good pal, and then really deeply believing in the cause and why he's bringing people into this kind of den of torture as the movie goes on. And he plays it all believingly. I think he's a fantastic find as an actor. He does a really good job. And again, the makeup and his makeup in particular really helps, but he pulls it off without it. I mean, he seems like a really good actor, and he nails it. I hope he's in more horror movies. This is a gnarly, nasty little number. There's there's a lot of tension early on, and certainly you get the vibe as they go deeper into Serbia and deeper into Macedonia that something bad's about to happen. But then every time St. Peter turns it around and he turns on his charm and he pulls them in further and pulls them in further until they find themselves in a situation they can't escape from. And you have to get that final girl energy from Emily Sweet, who, and to her credit, she's written well and she does a great job in this. She's a very strong female lead. Even early on in the movie, she's fighting like at each step of the way of going deeper, and it's the husband who's kind of encouraging her to go along with this charming dude who's just having fun. And so the way that her character is written is very good, I think. She's certainly the star, and that she's a believable star. This is a movie that probably doesn't need as many actors as it has even. I mean, this is a movie between Emily Sweet and Bruno Veljanovsky. This is a standoff between two powerful actors, good and evil, however you want to think about that. I will say that Bruno's family, when they do go into the the family home, and you see that, and the terror really starts. Those characters are designed well. This is a movie by somebody that's seen a lot of horror movies and has a good eye for what's scary and what's horrific, and I think they pull it off. It's a really good movie, and VSP has been a lot of fun to watch, just as a sub-label so far. I think this is release number 7, so it's crazy to think they've had a hand in producing 7 movies already. But yeah, this is a really fun label to watch. I'm very curious to see kind of what they do. I mean, Riddle of Fire, I believe, was fully produced by them. But then you even go back into movies like Divinity from a few months ago, which is just unbelievably good. And people have to watch. Sick of Myself is so good. Scary of 61st was way better than I thought it would be. Really cool little fun. I don't even know what the word is for that. Like a horror movie kind of based on psychosis and very frenetic and chaotic, similar to Possession almost. Obviously, New York Ninja is a fun story. If you don't know that story, They Live by Film has an episode on it, and there's a million interviews that Curtis has done on New York Ninja. And then Censor is one of the first ones that they did. It was a really fun throwback kind of horror film with some really great kind of splooshy, kind of squishy kills in it that are surprising. Y'all, we did it. So, okay, that is all of the Vinegar Syndrome mainline and sub-label releases for July. I hope you got something out of that. I promised to go through most of the untitles that I saw. Okay, I'm going to do this very quickly because I did promise I was going to do it.
Now that is a photo of the creature in its natural state. It's blurry.
Spearheading the search for the missing alien is Colonel Evan Rosenthal.
They will take the creature apart, little by little, bit by bit, until we understand every teeny little bit in which...
What does this song say to you?
Touch me and you'll pull back a stump.
I made it through 5. I can't remember if I said 4 earlier. I made it through 5. So we're going to see, I'm going to go alphabetical by label name and just quickly just talk about them. Amanda and the Alien is the new AGFA release. AGFA's up to 58 releases. That's insane. And they're still finding really cool pieces of culture. So Amanda and the Alien is a little bit like Starman, if you've seen Starman from Carpenter. But if you can imagine, it was made by somebody who loved Clueless, and maybe a little bit like Reality Bites. It's extremely 90s, but it's really fun piece of kind of a time capsule of the 90s with a story that's pretty similar to Starman. And also Venom a little bit. Like it's about this alien that comes in and takes over bodies and has a sexual exploration and awakening and then learns to love. And then, I won't spoil the third act, but it's a fun one to watch for sure. Bleeding Skull put out Way Bad Stone. If there's any tabletop fans in this audience, this is a movie that is just absolutely a must own. I don't know how else to say it. There will never be a more faithful Dungeons and Dragons adaptation, I guess you could say, than this. I don't think they claim it's a Dungeons and Dragons adaptation, but if it's basically people that were actually real Renaissance Fair folks getting together with a filmmaker from Florida and creating like a journey, like a story from one of these tabletop games and filming it with their friends. And there's some really cool costumes and set designs, considering the whole budget was $2,000. And from the quote from the director was that 90% went to feeding the 50 people that were working on the film. So Way Bad Stone from Bleeding Skull, really cool find, great fun movie to watch. Go Down Death from Factory 25. As much as I talk about different labels on here, I think this is the first Factory 25 release that I've actually seen. I'm going to try to watch more. It's an interesting one. This is a definitely a modern art, surrealist, non-linear kind of work of art, more than a linear film. Very experimental, Yeah, I don't. This is something. There's when Art Label broke off of Culture Shock and Art Label was started. This has a similar vibe to what I think Warren was talking about trying to start with Art Label. This is just yeah, it's a very experimental movie, and I wasn't quite in the mood for it. I'm gonna watch it again so I can talk more openly about it, and kind of give a more measured response. It caught me off guard, and I struggled to follow it, but that's more on me than the film itself. I'm ready for it now. I don't ever read much on movies before I go in. I like to go in blind and let the movie kind of surprise me, but occasionally for movies like this, it does mean I need to see them twice. Uh, Claire Denis, oh, okay, so IFC Films, is a relatively new partner label, and Bastards from Claire Denis is out, and it's a masterpiece. I don't know what else to say about it. It's an art house masterpiece, and it's gonna continue to rise on Sight and Sound list. I'm sure. I'm sure it'll continue to rise on the Issue Pictures. It's a beautiful. It's dark. It's very dark. It's very uncomfortable, and there are some scenes that are very horrific, as Claire Denis can do sometimes. But it's a fantastic movie. The basic premise is there's the guy trying to find this person who's sexually abusing kids. I guess I'm trying to think of what to say without spoiling too much. It's just, I guess it's sort of like if you think Taken, the premise of Taken, I guess, but you remove a lot of the Hollywoodness of it and you kind of strip it down to the idea of a chase to find, to prove somebody's guilty of committing these horrific crimes and turn it into more of a French art house picture. That's kind of what Bastards is, but it's a masterpiece. It's really good. And then speaking of experimental, Saturn's Core, I mentioned them earlier. Saturn's Core put out a double feature. I have not seen Kitty Killers, but I have seen Living a Zombie Dream, and the movie's really good. Like it's another one of these ones similar to maybe Cornshucker or some of these ones where it's an SOV film, but the way they construct the story is experimental, and it makes it to where when I'm watching it, I forget that it's an SOV. I'm just captivated in the way that they're editing and like the stories they make. This one is literally kind of asks the question of what would zombies dream about, but it does it in a very interesting way and extremely creative. And as always, it's chocked full of a ton of special features. So Living a Zombie Dream is a cool release from Saturn's Core. And speaking of high numbers, they're up to 37. So some of these partner labels from OCN are getting up to becoming, legitimate labels and unto themselves. But I'm glad they're there. It's easy for me to kind of go in one place and buy them all. So I hope they stick around for a while. I am on Instagram. I am on Reddit. I'll post the links in the episode. I would love to chat about this. Like, this is the fun thing I want to do. Like I said, I hope this is the only episode where I'm by myself. I'm trying to get guests. For the next 3 or 4 episodes, we already have guests lined up so that we should be good. I'm going to try to keep that going as much as possible. Try to get people from VS and try to get people from around the community as well. This is something that's important to me to not make mine, but to truly make something for the community, right? So I hope we can do that. If you have anything on this that you don't like or you want to hear more about, just tell me. I'm wide open. And one of the things I do want to highlight, there's a relatively new podcast coming out called the Trash Mex Podcast by Armando. And episode 1 just came out. And he's going to be a guest on here in October. If we can pull that off, I'm hoping that works to get him on in October. But yeah, Armando is a super talented, knowledgeable person. Go check out the Trash Mex Podcast. And what else came up in this episode? Go check out Eros Plus Massacre. That's Sam Deegan's podcast. Go check out Unsung Horrors. That's Erica Schultz's podcast. I mean, how can we possibly name all the great podcasts out there? Obviously, we're on someone's favorite production. Go check out Disconnected. If you want to see They Live by Film, we have, other than the recent Fast and the Furious series that we just went through, if you go back through our history, we have a lot of interviews with the OCN labels and a lot of the different boutique labels really trying to be passionate about promoting this industry. Y'all, thank you so much. I can't, anybody who's listened this far, thank you so much. Can't wait to do announcements on September 1st, right around September 1st. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a label to highlight, a partner label to highlight as well. I'm going to keep it a surprise, and I'm going to keep it a surprise because I don't have the guest finalized yet. But, we have time. So I'm going to get a guest finalized and try to bring in somebody from that label to talk about their films and really go a little bit more in depth after announcements to spend time talking about their films. So it should be fun. I hope this is a good addition to the episode, and give a chance to get to know some of the back, catalog titles a little better for some of these labels. Love you all. Again, on Instagram. I'm on Reddit. I'm not on Reddit under Punk Vacation. So check the links if you're on Reddit, come talk to me there. I try to write reviews. I average somewhere about 300 reviews a year that I write on Reddit, and also Letterboxd. I'm obviously on there. But then, They Live by Film is a place you can find some more of the interviews we've done and some film discussion we've done. And then I can't wait to do 100 of these. So, all right, see y'all later.